Welcome to the Health Ranger Report on Brighteon.tv. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and today we have really an emergency conversation. I reached out and invited this guest on. She made time for us because we are being inundated with requests from people wanting to know how to grow food, or do we have devices like the hydroponic bins that can help them grow food? And the best answer to that is going to be provided by our guest. Marjory Wildcraft is her name. And I've known her for many years, and she is one of the world's top experts on growing food when you need it to count, when you need it to work. This isn't decorative tulips and lilies and all this stuff. This is food you need to eat to stay alive, okay? That's what we're going to talk about here today. Not that there's anything wrong with flowers, but right now people want to not starve. So that's what we're going to focus on here today on the Health Ranger Report. We're going to have an extended interview. Stay with us here on Brighteon.tv. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Mike Adams here, joined by Marjory Wildcraft. And Marjory, it's always an honor to speak with you. I really admire your work. I talk about you in a positive way. I don't know if you hear about that, but welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, I hear about it from time to time. And yeah, Mike, we go back a long time. And what struck me preparing for this was, we've kind of known something like this was going to come for a long time because the systems were just not sustainable in the configuration they were. But now that it's actually happening, I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah, I know. People are freaking out. We're literally 1 out of every 3 phone calls we're getting right now is someone kind of panicked about how to grow food. Let me do this. Let me give out the web address where people can find your webinar that is how to grow food. Let me give that out right now. It's icangrowfood.com. Just go there. You can register for the webinar. You can watch it for free. And I think you also offer for people to purchase more information as well, right?
Yep. We have this Saturday at 2 p.m. is Central is going to be a live webinar where I'll be condensing 20 years of trying to figure out the fastest and easiest ways to get really good nutrition and calories in a grid down situation, even if you're like older or out of shape. How do you do that? And I'll be condensing about 20 years of trying to figure that out into a little over an hour. And then, but if you come to the live webinar, and we will have replays available, definitely bring your questions for the Q&A session afterward. Everybody really loves that the most.
Okay, so just to clarify, people are going to be watching this interview for many, many months, all year, frankly, especially as they get really hungry. March 12th is the Saturday that you're referring to, March 12th of 2022. But I hope you can keep that webinar up for replays for people for many months, if not the whole year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this is really what the Grow Network. Mike, did I ever tell you about how I got into this? I think people should know because I got into this because I was completely freaked out and scared.
I do want to ask you that, but hold on, one more thing. Let me give you some more kudos here because I just want to share with our audience that, I visited your farm when you lived in Texas. You're not there now, but when you were in Texas, I visited your farm and you were showing me this amazing bounty of things that you had managed to grow in what were honestly very sandy, poor soils.
Yeah.
The soils there were awful, by the way.
Yeah.
But you were still growing just all this food. You had this garden. It was high density and you know what you're doing. And I just wanted to say one more thing and I'll turn it back over to you. But folks, Marjory Wildcraft is not an academic researcher. She is a hands-on gal who knows what she's doing and she's done it for decades and she can teach you how to do it when it counts. Okay. So there you go. Those are my kudos for you, Marjory. But
thank you, Mike. Yeah. We managed to get a lot out of that Texas property and you can do this anywhere. But so I was originally, and I don't know if you know this background, but I was originally an engineer and I always wanted to live overseas. And I was an expat. I was a manager for Motorola, managing a couple of cellular telephone networks. And a friend of mine said, hey, Marjory, do you want to go take this class on how to make money from this guy named Robert? And I'm like, well, sounds interesting. Have you ever heard of the guy? And they were like, no, nobody's ever heard of him. I'm like, well, let's go anyway, So I go and this guy's like really brilliant, and I said, wow, he's going to be famous someday because he's really got some stuff. Anyway, I really embraced everything, his learnings, and ended up moving to Austin, Texas to create a real estate investment business that was very, very successful. And I was super happy because I had figured out how to have money make money. I mean, that's a really cool skill to have, right? And in fact, the business was so successful, it was Robert Kiyosaki who was the teacher.
Oh, no kidding.
I was on his, yeah, I was on his infomercials for 4 years, every day, every night, talking about rich dad, poor dad. So, and really at this incredible, I mean, I had built this whole business in Austin. It was very, very, very successful. Life was great. And I was volunteering on a project, and this is where my life completely changed and crumbled, but I was volunteering on a project in Red Rock, Texas, to get locally grown food into the local elementary school. And we thought this was going to be a slam dunk, Steve Bridges, who was the president of this little volunteer group, he was already writing grants because there's tons of grant money. And Patty Jacobs was already talked to the PTA and the principal that like they loved it. And this other guy, Mike, he's like one of these bearded guys with glasses, always researching and scratching himself, although he's funny. But kids who eat higher quality food score massively higher on intelligence tests and have way less behavioral problems. And that also translates to adults too, but most of the studies have been done on kids. So like this was going to be a slam dunk. And so then this is where the meeting fell apart. We got a piece of paper and a pen, and we started to write down the names of the farmers that would provide these vegetables. And we found out that there were not enough farmers in all of Bastrop County to provide even part of the vegetables for one small rural elementary school. And at that point in time, that's when the freak out happened. Like it was like I had some kind of stroke or something. I don't know what happened. I was just shaking for hours because I knew there was only 4 days worth of food in the grocery stores, the inventory, right? And I'm in Central Texas, surrounded by 20 million people. That's 60 million meals a day that were coming in on a just-in-time trucking system. And I had just found out there's no food growing in the countryside. Like right. No plan B here. And I literally just could not stop shaking. And
well, so
I sold the business, and I just said, I've got to learn how to grow food, and I've got to teach other people how to grow food, because there is the potential here for a colossal problem. And my health deteriorated, my relationships deteriorated. And my sister-in-law, she really kind of, she kind of succinctly put it this way. She was like, Marjory, this is the United States of America. She says, we are the strongest country on earth, and there may be supply chain problems in other countries. It ain't never going to happen here. And you're never going to see empty grocery store shelves in America. And I just said, well, I'm sorry, I've got to work on this. And so if you're freaked out and you're scared, you're having panic attacks, you're afraid, you're nervous, you can see some really, really horrific future coming, I've been there. And I will tell you, it's so humble, but growing your own food it will heal you on so many levels. You're physically, because of the nutrition and the gentle exercise.
But I want to get to that, but let me stop you with what you just said. What year was that you had that panic realization?
That was about 2003.
Okay. All right. So, wow, you're almost 20 years ahead of the panic that a lot of other people are experiencing now, because you saw that the structure of the system was unsustainable and highly vulnerable to systemic collapse. And yet it took like 19 more years before the current situation to unfold. Now, people who thought this could never happen, like your sister-in-law, I presume, are seeing, whoa, the fertilizer exports are cut off. Ukraine exports totally cut off as of 2 days ago. War with Russia. The U.S. fossil fuel pipelines shut down by Biden in order to halt fertilizer production domestically. All the farm inputs are being destroyed, supply chains. I did the math on this, Marjory, just based on what we know right now. 1 to 2 billion people will starve on this planet in the next year. Or
yes.
I mean, that's just based on food and crop failures. You got crop failures in China, crop failures in Canada. You got drought in the western half of the U.S. You got drought in South America. And then you have the loss of Ukraine crops, fertilizer shutdowns, fossil fuel shutdowns that create fertilizer, and then price inflation, higher prices for diesel. In Texas, diesel is $5.50 a gallon. You know what that does to farmers, right? So it's here. People, if you're not panicking, you either have incredible control over your emotions or you haven't got it yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's happening. And the really good news is there's something very proactive that you can do. Like, you do not need a multinationally industrial think tank complex to provide your basic needs. And
right.
You really don't even need a grid or gasoline or anything. But yeah, I hear I mean, I didn't know the exact details. And I've really admired your works. And then of course, Alex Jones how many people has Alex red pilled, like million. Totally. I was listening to him early on, and I didn't know how this was going to unfold exactly, but I knew that at some point we would be in this kind of a crisis. And that was the niche I was always called to, because I used to joke with Alex and say, hey, Alex, the empire might be on the run, but how are you going to eat dinner when they're gone? Like.
Yeah, totally. And by the way, I'll just share this publicly. For the last year or so, there's been a voice in the back of my head that keeps saying, Mike, stop doing podcasts and interviews and start growing food. And I've been growing some food, not enough to live on, but I've had amazing success with these non-circulating hydroponic bins that I use. They are incredible, but you know how to grow a lot more. So could you give us kind of what's your philosophy? I know it's low tech. Most of it works off grid. You don't need high tech gadgetry and electronics and monitoring systems. Give us a philosophy of how you teach people to grow food.
Well, I start out with a very simple system. There's a lot of different ways you can get food, lots and lots of ways. And there's probably food growing all around you that you don't even know right now. But I like to start people out with a very simple system that I created, and it teaches you how to grow half of your own food in a backyard-sized space in about an hour a day. And that's with a small flock of chickens, a small garden, and a home rabbitry. And these are going to be the most calorically dense and nutritionally dense and the quickest systems to get up to speed and running and producing food. And it's something that's also really available. Now, once you get that down, then there's all the other stuff, beekeeping and mushrooms and greenhouses and goats and, but I really recommend people start with those three. And we've really drilled down simple bite-sized chunks to take somebody who does know absolutely nothing and getting them producing right away. Like a flock of chickens, you can have a small backyard flock of chickens, laying hens, and, you build the coop over a weekend or two. You buy the hens, hopefully off of Craigslist or at a local farm, farm supply store, maybe off of a neighbor. Once they get settled in, which takes a few days to a week, you've got eggs. It happens fast.
Right. Yeah, it does. No, I'm getting fresh eggs every day here. My roosters are often crowing during the interviews because
I used to be famous for that. Like, there's always something in the back.
I know, and they're always competing over territory. But I'm getting fresh eggs. But and let me just interrupt and say, folks, the webinar is icangrowfood.com. That's where you can learn all this yourself. icangrowfood.com. But Marjory, you're talking about rabbits. I know that, you harvest those rabbits for food. And, I don't know if I could ever do that. I'm not sure how hungry I would have to be to kill the rabbits I'm raising. You know what I mean? I
actually was a raw vegan when I started this journey. But as you pointed out earlier, that land is so harsh. And actually growing, I realized that animal products are the most productive sources of food that you can create. And what I say is, I learned how to do it, and you can do it, and it's very simple. And it actually used to process small game used to be a skill that every single adult human being knew how to do, right? It used to be when mama said, go get me a chicken to the kids, what she meant was go get me one of the hens that's not producing or an extra rooster, and process it and defeather it and bring me the bird ready to cook, right? So that,
right.
But if you're still not ready to do that, there's a lot. That's why we have community, right? There's somebody who's a fisherman or a hunter or something that's very comfortable with that process. And you give them 10 bunnies and you say, you keep 2 and give me the other 8 and you process them, or a local organic farmer that's raising chickens. There are people with these skills that this is around. So
true. Yeah. That's,
we raise them. And my daughter, you say Kimber, you've met Kimber. She's funny. She actually used to name all the baby rabbits, which is supposedly a no-no. They were always something like Jumper or Thumper or Gravy because one of them was always gray. And And she would take them out to the trampoline to teach them how to jump. I'm like, Kimber, I don't think that's necessary, And then she knew exactly what their fate was. In fact, she would help me with the butchering. But we love them. We give them a good life. And that is the circle of life that we live in. And it's just a reality. And honestly, rabbits breed like rabbits.
Yes.
They're just a prolific food source, and they're an herbivore. So there's a distinction. People go, why don't you raise chickens for meat? And I have done that for many years, but chickens are omnivores, and they often want to eat the same food sources that I do.
That's true.
Can produce, they're herbivores. They're much more efficient to produce, and they'll eat, your grass and your landscape trimmings. And when you're trimming your fruit trees, they love the bark, and they eat a lot of things that I don't eat. So they're much more efficient animals to produce on a homestead.
Exactly. I have the same experience with the goats that we have now. I don't raise goats for meat. We did milk them for a while, but now they're basically pets and poop producers with hooves, which also has a function. Yeah, exactly. But what I do now with my hydroponic systems is after I've harvested lettuce and the lettuce has bolted, or an herb, basil or kale or whatever, and I'm cleaning out the bin, getting ready for the next batch, I just take that stuff and I chuck it into the yard. The goats find it, and then the goats have a great time, and they just chew up everything that I didn't want, and happy goats, and they cleaned up a mess for me as well. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And then rabbits would eat most of that stuff too, right? Yeah,
goats are amazing with what they'll eat. And I actually feel for Central Texas where you're living, goats are a much better animal than cattle, actually. Because the cattle are a little more finicky and need higher quality forage, but goats actually are much, much better. They're in the indigenous areas goats come from are actually, like the Mediterranean, which is a rocky, dry terrain. It's not particularly prolific anyway. Goats are great, but really the distinction there is that herbivores are a lot more cost effective to produce, because we also need to think not only in terms of producing our food, but creating the food for our livestock, right? Because you're not, just because you're going to start growing your own food and the grocery stores are shut down, it does not mean the feed store is going to be open, right? You gotta.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned that about goats, because I should mention I have fat goats. They're all fat.
You do, yeah.
They're really fat, and I barely feed them anything. I mean, I give them a little bit of goat food for the minerals, just to make sure they're not missing some mineral. But I can't keep them thin. And I walk them, by the way. I walk my goats every day. I take them for over a mile walk, and I still can't get them thinner because they find so much to eat. So that's my fault. I know I could confine them, but I don't want to. I'd rather them be fat and happy. They're fat and happy goats. They're like Buddha goats, But okay, getting back on track. I mean, we have animal stories all day. So one of the things that you offer in your webinar is, or at least the promise as I've read it on your site, is that a person doesn't need to be an expert in this. They don't even need to be in good physical shape. So I was joking one time, it's like gardening for fat people, right? But of course or older folks, yeah.
Yeah, for a long time, the Grow Network has been a very difficult business to run, like, selling supplements or overcoming cancer or something. It's much more financially attractive to people. So we've really had to figure out what is the best, what is the best way. And a lot of times it's been an older community that has been attracted to the Grow Network. And a lot of them are like, Marjory, I can't bend over, or, I can't pick that up. So all of the systems have been designed specifically for that. And then I've also taught, so I taught over there at the Baptist Church in Red Rock, and then also at the elementary school, little kids. We teach them this whole, so everybody from little kids to elders has implemented this system. Really, at this point in time, we've taught hundreds of thousands of people how to do this. And I know that tens of thousands of them have been implemented. I've been doing it for, I don't know, a good decade or so. So I know this system works.
Oh, yeah. And tell us, what kinds of food can people get out of your system? You already mentioned the rabbits and such, but root crops, potatoes, I mean, what's the variety? Yeah.
So, out of your chickens, of course, you're going to get eggs, and eggs are an unbelievably nutritious food. You get about 1,500 eggs a year if you have 6 laying hens, and that you can fit them into the size of a parking spot. And the same thing with your rabbitry. I recommend 1 buck and 3 breeding does. And again, that would fit into about the size of a parking spot, really, where you set up the the Hutches. And then I recommend a small garden, like 2 square foot beds. I've been recommending people to stack up like 2 cinder blocks high, which gives you about 16 inches of depth. And the cool thing is then you can sit on the cinder blocks and just reach in. So it's very good for people with limited mobility. Other people will sometimes build them, get somebody to build the raised beds even higher so they don't even have to do that. And really in 100 square feet, you can grow a ton of different things. Now, Irish potatoes are going to be the most calorically dense food that you can grow. And you get about a pound of potatoes per square foot. And that ends up being in 100 square foot bed, that's going to be about 54,000 calories. We often don't like to think, calories is kind of a tough thing. It would be about 100 pounds of potatoes. And I would say that a good sized potato is about a half a pound. So you're talking about 200 servings of potatoes from 100 square foot bed.
Wow.
And, the rabbitry there in Texas, where we really can't breed for about 5 months of the year because it's so dang hot and the bucks just don't produce. And nobody in Texas wants to be pregnant in the summertime. I promise you. I was getting, 75 to 85 rabbits a year out of my rabbitry. And that's, a rabbit is very similar to a chicken in terms of the amount of meat and bones and stuff you get out of it. So that's, 75 rabbits a year is about like 75. So that's like a chicken and a half every week, which turns out, if you do the math, is the amount of protein requirement for a family of 4. We would all like more protein, of course, but that is, the recommended amount.
Wow. So, and let me interrupt. And so the rabbit droppings, of course, go back into the garden for the fertilizer, and then the garden waste goes to the rabbits.
Yeah. And, actually small home rabbitries that are on a commercial scale. And so I'm not talking the big farming type, but I'm talking like somebody who has 100 or 50 rabbits. They make money by selling the fur, and they make money by selling the meat, and they make money by selling the little breeders. But where they make the most money is underneath the hutches. They will collect the droppings and create worm bins, and they make way more money by selling the worms. And then the worm compost, the frass from the worms, is an unbelievably good fertilizer. So a lot of times these small commercial rabbitries, the only way they actually make it is by the worm bin and the worm fertilizer underneath.
That was one of the questions I had for you, is with the global fertilizer supplies now really impaired significantly. We need to focus on, like you just may not be able to get any, period. We need to focus on local fertilizer sources, and you just described some of them. What are some other things? Composting and worm castings and so on. Those are probably the best solutions right there. What would you add to that?
The worm compost is, like, I've worked with Dr. Elaine Ingham, who is kind of the goddess of soil microbiology, and worm compost, and then what we call compost tea that's made from worm compost is the most enriching biologically active fertilizer that you can create. But Mike, when they sign up for the webinar, I give them 5 free resources, and one of them is an ebook. It's actually the most favorite ebook in the Grow Network, and it's 50 free homemade fertilizers.
All right, hold on a second, Marjory. Just stay with that. We're out of time for this segment. Seriously, we're a little bit over. We'll continue in the extended interview. We'll get right back to you. This is the segment for Brighteon.tv, folks. This interview continues on Brighteon.com, on my channel, HR Report. Thank you for watching Brighteon.tv today, and thank you, Marjory, for joining us, but please stay with us. There's more. Okay, that's the show for Brighteon.tv. Sorry about that.
No.
I hate to interrupt you. But okay, now go ahead where you were headed with that.
That was a great place to segment out of.
Okay, yeah, well, that's a kind of a strict clock on that. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so actually one of the best fertilizers, and you're going to be a little bit shocked at this, is your own urine. What I used to do, just outside the back door, I had a 5-gallon bucket, and just go pee in the bucket, dilute it 10 to 1, and apply it to the soil. And it's just, I think typically, depending on how much meat you've been eating or how much protein you've eating, but it's typically got about 18% highly plant usable nitrogen in it. And the reason why is, the air is like 70% nitrogen, and we don't really need it for our bodies. So for us, it's a waste product, and it comes out, primarily in our urine. And I've seen a study before that for a purely vegetarian diet, it turns out that the urine that you produce as one individual is enough nitrogen to completely fertilize your own garden setup, even if you were only eating a vegetarian diet out of your garden.
Wow.
So, and nitrogen is one of the big three, right? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium; those are the big three. We definitely need the full bevy, but that's actually the best source of fertility.
So that's fascinating, because you're right. I mean, nitrogen is in the air. We're swimming in a pool of nitrogen, but plants can't access it in the air. But through things like microbes and legumes, they're nitrogen fixing microbes in the soil, right? So they'll push that into the soil. But you can be, or we can be, like legumes on legs, and and just use your urine, which is the result of nitrogen fixing, I suppose, in your own physiology. That's really cool.
We taught we had many courses sponsored in the Red Rock area while I was working on that community. And one of our teachers that was teaching, she always made the most beautiful vegetable starts. I'm like, Nancy, what's your secret? And she goes, 10-to-1 urine when I'm watering the vegetable starts. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then it brings up the obvious question: humanure.
I've done that quite a few times, and I really recommend that people learn humanure, because when the grid goes down, your sewage is going to stop, right? And you're going to have to deal with your own. I'm going to be frank about this. You're going to need to learn to deal with your own shit. So it's a really, really good thing. We found when we were homesteading, we did it for a while, and just with all the things that you have to do, we said, this one is a little bit too much work right now. We've done it. We know how to do it. Let's not do this right now. But it's really pretty simple. You just, again, get like a 5-gallon bucket with a toilet seat on it and fill it up with, or have a lot of either leaves or sawdust or something. And then every time you have feces in there, you cover it and just keep adding to it. And then it just kind of becomes its own little compost pile. One funny thing is, we had heard about a system in the Andes. I tried all kinds of things. And what they used to do is they would make a hole, and the family would, go there, and then they would make another hole, and they would have like 5 or 6 or 8 of these holes all around an area with like a 6 or 8 foot diameter. And then in the center of that, they would plant a young tree. And then by the tree's roots reached out there, that would be, so like just a really rich area of nutrients. And I tried that in Texas. And the first time I went out, it worked really good. And then I discovered that fire ants actually love. And the second time I was like, oh no. That project didn't work that well. So
yeah. They start at your ankles and they move up.
Right.
Yeah, fire ants, another amazing import from outside the country.
Oh my gosh. Fire ants are edible also, by the way. So
are they? I have not tried that.
It's kind of lemony. Yeah, they kind of, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I was joking the other day that America's going to be eating cricket McNuggets before long. And I know that you know how to prepare and eat some insects too, right?
I have gone down that road because look, we have the potential here of facing a time. Do you know the name of that dish in Mexico where it's like basically old clothes? It's like sopa de ropa or something like that, where they're talking about a time in famine that they would just boil their old clothes or their old leather and try to make soup out of it because there was nothing.
What?
So,
no.
Do I want to eat insect? No, I don't want to eat it. But they're full of protein and fat, and if push comes to shove, I want to live.
Well, it kind of makes rabbits seem altogether more pleasant.
It does. Yeah.
Wow.
There's lots and lots of things that we can do, and there really is. In Texas, we've got those mesquite trees that everybody thinks is such a weed and so annoying. They're so prolific with those beans. which, there's a lot of really great carbohydrates in there. The seeds are really hard to crush, but there's actually a good amount of protein in the seeds. The prickly pear cactus. I mean, there's probably a lot of food all around you that you just don't recognize because we've never had to worry about that.
Oh yeah, I've identified, I think, 8 or 9 wild foods just on my own ranch. One of them is the wild onions, of course, that the hogs always go after, and then the hogs themselves are another source.
Themselves, right?
Right.
Like what wild hog problem? I'm thinking of that as a free bacon issue.
I know. I see hogs quite frequently when I'm out walking my goats, for example, and I'll see, there's a 300-pound hog just running across, and he'll look at me, I'll look at him, and then he'll turn around and run the other way. Sometimes I've encountered multiple litters with like 50 to 75 baby hogs and their mamas all cruising around together. And that's a riot, by the way.
That's a big, yeah.
Yeah. They're funny. The babies are so funny. They squeal and they run, and they try to play dead. They try to hide. It's so funny. I'm not even doing anything.
Oh, they're so cute.
Yeah, they're really tiny. They're only this big, and then they're just like running along. But anyway, animal stories. Okay, so we still have a little bit of time left. So what do people need to know? Because I get distracted easily with all this stuff. What practical things do people need to know that you have in your webinar? Like, give us some other tips, please.
Sure. So, going with those first 3 are really important with rabbits and chickens and a garden. And then you actually could really get that up and running really in just a few months if you really focused on it and made it happen. And as I said, with the chickens, you can be producing in just a couple of weeks. The rabbits, you're going to harvest them about 12 weeks. I tend to get mine kind of fat, so I do later than that. But I mean, very quickly you can have systems up and running. And then, as you mentioned, these systems, the reason I put these 3 together is that they really are self-feeding. So the rabbit manure and the chicken manure feeds the garden, and then the things from the garden feeds the rabbits and the chickens. So it's a very circular system. When you do get started, there are lots of ways to feed completely your chickens and to completely feed your rabbits without ever going to a feed store. And in fact, I think that's another thing we give people when they sign up for the webinar is a wonderful video Justin Rhodes had created for us of how to feed your chickens 100% for free. So when you sign up, we'll get you access to that video. But I recommend in the beginning, just buy some chicken feed. It still is inexpensive, right? Just go buy some rabbit pellets. It is inexpensive. And the reason why is you've got a lot to learn, right? You're developing new habits. You're realizing you're going to have to go check on these things every day, and you got to set up a record keeping system for the rabbit. I mean, you're learning a lot, and just because systems are collapsing does not mean you're going to have extra time. Yeah,
and in the meantime, everything else in the world is trying to eat your chickens before you can, too, right? So I mean, and the rabbits, you're dealing with coyotes and owls and snakes and all kinds of, at least here in Texas, that's what we deal with. And raccoons. Oh, the raccoons are the worst.
Yeah, you shouldn't ask, do I have raccoons? You should ask, where's my nearest raccoon?
True. So true. Yeah. And then, yeah.
Fascinating for that are game cameras. I just love game cameras. It's unbelievable what you'll see on those game cameras. It's also extremely useful for security against the two-legged types too.
Yeah. Good point. But and then you get into layers of security. So of course I have dogs, and the dogs definitely keep the raccoons away, and they kill a couple every year, it seems. But when the dogs are young, they also want to eat the chickens. So you got to train them not to eat the chickens, but to chase away the raccoons. There's this.
I'm glad you brought that up. I usually have 2 dogs as a part of my system. And I don't want big dogs because I don't want to have to feed the dogs. And I don't want little dogs because I don't want, I need a dog that's going to be able to stand up to the raccoons or something.
True.
So and I like 2 of them because this is not a dog that's not my pet. They need to be their own, if it's only one dog, then it's going to look to you for, you're the pack, right? But if it's 2 of them, then they understand, and they're outside dogs. And, generally they're big enough to runoff raccoons and maybe a single coyote or two. But if a pack of pigs comes along, then they start barking. And I just know I'm going to get up in the middle of the night with a rifle or something. Often I've never even actually normally ever had to shoot them. Often just my presence had the pigs or the coyotes leave and the dogs barking. Pigs are getting more and more bold though. So, having a rifle on hand is a good idea. Another big myth is people think, oh, this is all out in the rural countryside. Actually, I've had more wildlife living in the suburbs than I ever did in the countryside. And in the suburbs, if you think about it, there are way more food sources for coyotes and bobcats and raccoons. There's everybody's garbage. There's everybody's pets. There's a lot more landscape, trees with things on it. So there's way more density of wildlife in the suburbs than there is in the countryside.
Yeah, good point. A lot of people, in the morning, like, where's Fluffy? Fluffy became dinner for that pack of coyotes. But I wanted to ask you about the city anyway. So some people watching this live in the city, and you and I are talking about rural living, like you just march out with a rifle and deal with it. Okay, for us, that's normal. But for a lot of people, that's crazy. They're living in a city. How does your system apply to city folks or even suburb living?
Yeah, now suburban stuff, you can absolutely produce almost everything you need in your backyard. Really, that, like I was talking about, the 3-part system to produce half really is just the size of 3 parking spots. And as your systems and skills develop, you can get a lot more. And isn't it that the DeVarvis family or something in Los Angeles, that like all they have is a 1/4 acre lot and they're producing so much, they have a CSA where they're selling produce. So there's a tremendous amount you can do. Now, even if you're living in an apartment or a condominium, now if you're living in New York City, my big advice to you is get out. Get out. You have got somewhere else to go. I promise you. Right. I get hit up with television producers whenever there's some big thing and they're like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, you'll probably be fine right now, but you need to get out of New York City when it really falls apart. But there is a lot to do in condos. And actually, I moved to Puerto Rico a little while ago. I could not grow. So I did 2 things. One, other than inside, you can do a lot, of course. I'm talking about herbs and sprouts and patio stuff. And actually, you can grow mushrooms indoors. You can keep quail indoors, which will get you quail eggs and quail meat. So there's a lot. And some people even keep rabbits indoors. So there's a lot that you can do in apartments and condominiums. But the better things, I just went out and guerrilla gardened on a piece of land that, was a pathway to the beach. And the other thing I'm doing is, and this is also, somebody doesn't know anything, I got the best advice for you. I'm creating a community garden and I've identified a 6-acre tract of land. I'm working with the municipality. We've laid out a plot for 350 garden plots. And the vision here is, once we get this going, can you imagine what we're going to learn in just one season when we have 350 different gardeners growing, like everybody from newbies to these, multi-generational, native Puerto Ricans that have been growing food forever, and everybody trying this and having different varieties of seeds and that and the other, and what we can see in just one season of what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
And then that can get spread to the rest of, the whole community. So a community garden, and people might be going, it's collapsing and it's falling apart. And look, but by the time this thing is done, whatever this decade or so that we're going through, where we're going to completely restructure the world, I promise you, there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands of community, like there'll be a community garden in every neighborhood. So you might as well get yours started right now.
Yeah, true. It's just, people are going to have to learn a lot about how long it takes to get food. So from planting to harvest, it could be 90 days, 120 days, depends on the crop, whatever. Or for rabbits, 12 weeks, like you said. For chickens, if you're hatching them, then it's going to take maybe 7 or 8 months for them to start laying, or whatever. What depends on the breed. But there's something funny about this. McDonald's announced that they were shutting down all their stores, all their fast food restaurants in Russia. So there was actually a photo circulating of a desperate Russian who lives on McDonald's, and he stocked his refrigerator with McDonald's food as a form of stockpiling. There's actually a photo. I'll see if we can show it to people here.
Yeah, those burgers will probably last a century too, right?
Well, that's the thing. You know, you don't even need refrigeration, man. That stuff will never rot. But that's the way some people think that stockpiling is buying 100 Big Macs, you know? Like that's their plan.
Ranger buckets. I get some for my kids whenever you have them in stock. Those are awesome.
Yeah, we rarely have them in stock because they go like that, and it takes a long time to package them, to make them, and then we're having trouble getting raw materials, obviously, and everything's getting more expensive, and the supply chain's getting worse. Talk about that. I mean, how? I know you're not a doom and gloomer type of person. You're actually a very cheerful person, and I think that's due to growing a lot of your own food, by the way. But how bad do you think it's going to get for people who don't have these skills?
How big and how bad is that going to be? I don't know, but that's an underlying factor. We definitely are having the collapse of the financial system, right? When they shut down the SWIFT payments to Russia, now there's everybody, this nickel rose 500%, and all these guys, all these nickel manufacturers now have open short losses of billions of dollars. I mean, and then of course, the money. So like how much money, like what is in 2021 or 20, they printed like 40% of all US dollars ever created were made. And
that's right.
Like the inflation is the hyperinflation. I mean, we're going to definitely have everything collapsing, and including our own government, right? It's going to get really, really, really messy. But I have to tell you, I am more hopeful than I have ever been in my entire life, because all of my life, I've known we've lived in these quite corrupt systems, right? But it never seemed like there was anything we could ever do about it, right? I'm a huge fan of silver. And even 25 years ago, I realized how unbelievably manipulated all these markets are, right? And then the healthcare system and the school system and all these systems that we have that actually do not really serve humanity, but serve these other purposes, but they're so big and they're so entrenched. And how many times have we seen lawsuits that, of course, the big corporations won or the whatever won, and it just never seemed, I mean, our legal system is unbelievably skewed and corrupt, right? It just always seems so hopeless. But now with everything collapsing, I really believe that there is a potential for us to completely rectify that and create things that are actually really serve a higher purpose for humanity and can be done in a completely different and more efficient way. But it is, like when you clean your house, you usually make a huge mess first, right?
Yeah, but part of
before you put it all together.
One of the questions though in this is, a lot of people won't go in the direction of, oh, hey, I need to learn how to grow food. Instead, they'll go on to the government Mark of the Beast digital ID food rationing card or whatever that looks like, right? And they'll say, oh, government should feed me. Like the thought of actually being self-sufficient never occurs to them. So, a lot of people, especially those watching this, are going to join you and I. We're going to be self-sufficient. We are in many ways already. But, there's a whole segment of the world that won't. And I'm wondering how many of them will survive, frankly.
I honestly don't. Because what is the government going to give you except for GMO stuff, right?
Right.
And how long can you live on that? I mean, people do seem to live on it a long time, but they ultimately aren't. They're not able to reproduce anymore. They're coming up with all kinds of diseases. Most likely they've taken whatever big pharma is telling them they should take. I really see that's, as I said, I don't know how that's going to unfold, but I do see that we're going to see a lot of death.
Well, one of the thoughts
I mentioned about those people that growing food is, I was in Bastrop. They used to have a really lovely gun shop there run by a guy named John. And I remember going in there when I first made that very first DVD, like back in 2009. And I say, hey, John, I bet, you could sell this. And he goes, I'll never have to buy, he said, I'm never going to need this. And I said, why? The grocery store shut down, whatever. And he goes, no. And he said, and he pulled out, and I didn't know enough about guns at that time. He pulled out this big black semi-automatic something. And he said, with this, I'm going to get everything I need from people like you.
Oh my.
I know, right? And I'm like, okay. That was when I decided I was going to learn how to shoot a gun.
Yeah.
I used to be the kind of woman you go in the Academy Sports shop and I would go to get sleeping bags and I just couldn't even look at the gun counter, and then, but afterwards now I'm like, oh my God, I want to get one of those and one of those, but yeah, there's an increase in violence is absolutely, we're going to see a lot more of that because, people really, yeah.
I'm predicting food riots. Of course, in America, before the end of this year, you're going to see food riots in every major city, probably, but also what they call flash mob looting of grocery stores. So you're going to see flash mobs going in, and they're going to go for the meat because that's the highest value. And so instead of robbing Nike shoe stores or fashion purses, which is what we've seen so far, they're going to be robbing the grocery stores. And then, what the response is going to be, Marjorie? The grocery stores are going to start to be set up like prison camps where, right, you walk in and now there's security guards and there's checkpoints and probably, mark of the beast, RFID scanners. You can see this. It's so obvious where it's going.
Yeah. I mean, we just saw it in 2020. It came pretty close to that with the 6-foot spacing and the lines for hours in order to just get in,
Yeah, right.
And then when you got in the empty shelves, I mean, we're already being conditioned, like skip that whole experience, and I really do recommend people getting as much backup food supply as you can right now, because really,
it's going to help you.
Food does take, you're going to screw some things up. Some things are going to die. It's going to happen. You're learning a whole new thing, and you're also, you are going to be busy dealing with other things, and you're going to have family that thought you were nuts coming by, and you're not going to want to turn them down. You need to give them something, right? So
give them a pack of seeds and say, you figure it out. Yeah. Okay.
Or, like I've got a whole bunch of wheat. I don't really eat wheat. I'm not really good with gluten. But the grains are very inexpensive and they store a long time. And there are other people that do eat it. And so, I have it because I'm going to either give it away to family and friends or I'm going to trade it for something else. The beans are not necessarily a big part of my diet, but I have them because they're really high calorically dense, easy to store. And they only last for about 5 years in storage. But I promise you, everything's going to get eaten in the next year. So it's not going to last 5 years.
No question. One of the things I wanted to mention is that here's a bizarre dynamic, is that one of the factors that may reduce the demand pressures on the global food supply is the number of people dying off.
Yeah, but you have to counterbalance that with the complete breakdown of the supply chain.
Of course, yeah.
Inflation, and I do get it. I do get it that there will be less and less people around.
But it's just fascinating to me that the globalists are running multiple layers of extermination plans. So, first it was, it's die from starvation, and then it's going to be die from economic collapse, and then violence and riots and war, right?
And this has actually been very well predicted. In 2015, Cargill sponsored a scenario, kind of like, Event 201 in September of 2019. And it was called the food chain reaction. And it used to be up and available on the internet. I was not smart enough at that time to realize how important these scenarios were. I do remember it happening, but I wasn't totally clued into it. But the overall scheme was that something big would happen in 2020. And then for the next years throughout the decades, there'd be all kinds of weird weather events, and there'd be all kinds of supply chain problems, and the price of food in the first year would go up by like 20 or 40%. And every year thereafter, it would go up at least by 100% for the entire decade. And what does that look like?
Whoa.
They took the websites are still up, and you can still see little teasers on YouTube, but the heart of it has been taken down. And they absolutely predicted, as you were talking about, the violence, the shutting down of countries and the shutting down of global trade, and then the amount of people that would die, and it was in the billions.
Yeah. There's no question. If you do the math, you can see that billions will die. It's just a question of how long it takes, or how much people suffer, or do we lose human civilization? Because there's a tipping point. You know this, Marjorie. You're a scientifically minded individual, technically trained and so on. There's a tipping point beyond which a complex society loses the necessary redundancies for long-term sustainability. Do you think we're approaching that?
Not yet, but I mean, I see that there is a probable scenario. Like, let's take the ability to grow food. World War II with the Victory Gardens is a very hopeful thing. 40%, there were 20 million new novice gardeners that produced 40% of the produce that this country consumed in 1 year. But, the ability to read and write could certainly be lost in a generation or two, I mean, it really could get that bad. At this point, it's not, I don't know, that's another, the other reason I'm so big on community gardens is gathering together the people. First of all, those are the kind of people you want to be around. They're not afraid of hard work. They're not afraid of getting their hands in the soil. They're proactive. They're doing something. Most people who are growing food, like at the Grow Network, we're non-political and we're non-denominatory on religion, and often we're non-dietary oriented. We just want to grow food, and they cooperate a lot. And so those are the people that you're going to want to know in your community, and those are the people you're going to want to support. The other wonderful thing about it is, so I've gotten into martial arts in the past couple of years, and I'm in Shotokan. I'm getting ready to test for my brown belt. I'm like so excited, but one of the side effects of that I didn't realize is I train with the same people like 3 times a week. And we're in a dojo. We're all wearing these god-awful, ugly clothes. But you don't know who anybody is other than, you know them, but you don't know, are they a school teacher? Are they multimillionaire? Are they a bum on the street? But you're all training. You're coming together for the love of this sport. And you're helping each other because, learning new stuff, it's hard. And then when you get it, we all celebrate together. And the bonds and relationships and friendships and family that gets created out of this. And I thought, wow, in a community garden, the same thing would happen, because you would be running into the same people, at least a couple of times a week when you're going to check on your thing, and you'd be seeing people, and it really builds community in a way that we have to get back to. So, I know people are like, oh God, community garden, right? I'm like, yes, community garden. All these simple, humble things are really super. Growing food, harvesting food, processing food, and sharing food is the glue that has held human families and human tribes together forever, right? You go all the way back as far ancient as you want to go. And that is the glue that held us together. And those bonds have been separated by grocery stores, but us coming together again will actually strengthen us and unite us. And something I think a lot of us are really longing for is that community.
That's true. And, just a silver lining, did you know that flash mob violence is community looting?
Yeah, it is. There's another sense of community. All right.
That's right. There are many ways people can come together, to commit acts of mass theft against grocery stores. No, of course.
Those are shorter term incidents, though, but I'm talking about long-term relation. Yeah. Okay. Community building through looting, organizing loots. I'll work on that.
Well, no, but the thing is, you have a community garden, and then there's going to be another team that's the community looters, and they're going to loot the community garden. So you need community firearms experts, community shooters.
Yeah, that's why I'm really recommending a community garden on a larger scale that's well fenced, because then that way you can, figure out enough of a security detail to work on that. And
we used to worry about protecting our food from deer. Now it's going to be the other people who did not prepare, right?
Yeah. Dogs are still really good for that. Dogs are the best thing for protecting from deer, and probably also from humans. They're different breeds of dog, but yeah.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. This is amazing. There's obviously a lot more to cover, but you have a lot in your webinar, and that's what people are going to want to see. The website for that is icangrowfood.com. And I wonder, you might want to register ican'tgrowfood.com and have a little message there. It says, yes, you can, and then redirect them to I Can Grow Food.
Oh, God, I might go do that, Mike. I might do that.
Self-doubt. You can grow food, right? Just in case people are being, self-sabotaging on that particular day. I can't grow food, and they type it in like tears and tears. But you can actually. Okay. I'm sorry. I just.
No, that's fun. I like that. I'm going to do that.
Perfect. I think that'll be great. Okay. And then it is, they can watch it for free, but I want to have a disclaimer. If they buy something, there is an affiliate arrangement. I think you pay our
some percentage. Yeah. Because, I really appreciate, I really appreciate you helping to get the word out. And
absolutely.
I honestly, I'm really interested in getting as many people who are awake and aware to survive this process. And you are not going to make it through this decade if you are not growing food. It just ain't going to happen. So
that's so true. Yeah, so true. Hey, and one more thought. I know you don't teach the hydroponic system that I use, but I got to tell you, I was so amazed how well it produces food with so little effort. Because there are times I don't add water for a week. There are times when I never add nutrients. It's just the first time.
I bought one of those from you in the beginning, and actually you inspired me to buy a 3D printer, and we printed out the parts back when you were giving out the plans for it.
Yeah.
I need to pick some more of those up and do it again.
Well, you know what? I simplified the system, and we got rid of the parts. We got rid of the float valve. We got rid of everything complex. And now I use a laser to cut the holes in the lid. It's like a laser you can buy online. And then I just cut 6 holes, and I plant in only 5 holes. I leave 1 hole, and I use a kitchen sink cover for that 1 hole. And then I open it up and I look in there. It's like, does it need water? So I try to make it super low tech, and that's what the system is now. It's
nice. I want to pick some more of the. I'll have to get the plans from you and do them again, and I'll send you photos or video about it, because it was a really prolific system. I really liked it. It worked real well.
It's unbelievable what I'm getting out of these systems, and with again almost no effort, no weeding, no soil, and I grow them at about chest height, so I don't even have to bend over to harvest the food or do anything.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. And they handle a lot of neglect, which is good because I don't always get back to it.
We all need that.
They're very resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I just want to share that with you. Thank you, Marjory, for coming on and for being so joyful and inspirational in what you're sharing with the world here. This is critical. This is do or die time, I think, for all of us. Frankly.
You know what, Mike? I just want to say at the end that horrible night in Red Rock, when I realized that my life was going to change completely and I was going to have to focus on growing food, I am so grateful for that now, because I'm so much more healthier and I'm so much more grounded and happier, and I have a purpose. And it really, I know it sounds so simple and so humble, but really growing your own food is incredibly empowering, and it will, if you've got mental health problems, this is way better than therapy. There's so much joy that can come from it. So I just want to encourage people. And if you're freaked out, I've been there. Just get some rabbits and chickens in a garden, and you will feel so much better.
Yeah. Good point. I want to ask you this off air, but I'll ask you the question publicly, but you can answer it off air. Maybe it's in your course. If someone wanted to get started with rabbits, what kind of hutch do you get? So think about that, and I'm sure you covered in your course. And also, by the way, folks, if you go there on the 12th, March 12th, you can participate in the Q&A session there. You can ask questions live. But I want to ask you about rabbit hutches, just in case, if I might want to grow some rabbits. I don't know. That's still a tough one for me. I might prefer to shoot hogs if I have to. I'm not sure. But I want to ask you that offline. But thank you, Marjory, for spending time with us today. It's been great.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you.
For those of you who want to repost this interview, feel free to do so. You can post it on your own channel or other platforms as well. And we're going to have Marjory back also as this food scarcity situation rolls out. It's been a while since we interviewed Marjory, maybe too long, but we need to do this on a more regular basis because of the situation our world is in today. So thank you for watching today. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, of course, Brighteon.com, and I need to go because I need to go grow more of my own food, come to think of it. All right, so thanks for watching today, and thank you, Marjory. Survival Nutrition is our new free audiobook that you can download right now from survivalnutrition.com. In this nearly 8-hour audiobook, you will learn life-saving secrets of how to use food, nutrients, plant molecules, trace minerals, and chemical compounds to save your life, even in a total collapse scenario. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and I'm the author of Survival Nutrition. I founded and run a multi-million-dollar food science laboratory, and I'm the author of the best-selling science book, Food Forensics. I'm also a prepper, a patriot, and a survivalist. I can teach you how to survive what's coming by growing your own food, medicine, and antibiotics that can help keep you healthy and alive even during the worst of times. At survivalnutrition.com, you'll be able to instantly download the full free audiobook as MP3 files. Keep a copy of all these files on your local hard drive and print out the full guide just in case we lose the power grid. survivalnutrition.com.